Hi, good afternoon, guys. It's Amanda and Jeff from
How you doing?
CenterBeam Real Estate. Welcome to my home. As you can see, we're currently working remotely as much as we can.
Arm distance apart.
Yes,
Trying to be
yes.
safe.
I'm looking forward to giving you guys some helpful tips during this time and moving forward.
Right. So this webinar, we're going to go over some questions that we've been getting asked by a lot of our owners, and if you're managing your own property right now, might be helpful for you as well, just to know what we're doing as a company. So things have changed a little bit in the past month as far as our daily operations. The first thing that we're going to touch on a little bit is how has maintenance changed? Are we still doing maintenance? What type of maintenance are we doing? Amanda, if you want to take it from here.
Yeah, so we have noticed some decrease in work orders and maintenance requests through our tenants currently. However, we are trying to still take care of some items that we need to, the necessities. With that being said, we are currently making sure our maintenance tech is taking the proper precautions to help our tenants and our tech. So they are wearing proper gloves, face mask, foot booties, anything that will help prevent anything going forward with our tenants or our maintenance.
Right. So basically the bottom line is we are still doing maintenance, and we're just kind of doing it more on an emergency only basis. If there's minor things that your tenant has that need to be fixed that isn't quite critical right now, tenants are just like the rest of us. They don't want people in their house unnecessarily, just trying to be safe and take as much precautions as they can. Just have them document with a photo, keep these photos for future purposes. That's what we'd recommend as far as for most maintenance items. But also, there are different types of maintenance that still can be done aside from emergency maintenance and things that are kind of more critical that have to be done to prevent any future damage. But one of those things is maintenance on the exterior of the house.
Yeah, absolutely. So as it's the perfect opportunity right now as a landlord or homeowner to try to take more attention on the exterior. That's with gutters, roofs, blowing off roofs, landscaping. What's there?
A lot of fences, for example. Fences are kind of notorious as far as breaking down, and we do have hurricane season coming, so now is the best time. There's latches are always going bad on fences, slats on fences, so we have had a lot of tenants requesting maintenance on those, which we've been able to do.
Exterior lights, window sills, stuff that you can possibly do right now to help make the property look a little cleaner and spruce it up a little bit if you can.
And like you mentioned, landscaping is kind of big right now. I myself spent a lot of money on landscaping my own house and still didn't get yard of the month. So
goals, you can work on it.
But so bottom line, we are still doing maintenance. It's just changed a little bit. And vendors, we have all of our vendors that we typically use in our network are still operating and they're still in business. Plumbers, electricians, HVAC techs, they're still out there trying to do as much as they can. And the only advice we'd have as far as vendors, make sure they're also taking proper precautions just to make your tenant feel good about what's going on and to keep everyone safe. And also, pay your vendors properly. If you are using outside vendors, you don't want to be the person who, is known for not paying your vendor for 2 or 3 months during the coronavirus. You may not get the same type of service in the future if you do that. So just keep that in mind as well. But otherwise, our vendors are still working, and so is CenterBeam's maintenance department as well.
Absolutely.
So the next question that we're going to kind of talk about briefly is communication, and how has our communication changed? What are we communicating? How often are we communicating?
Right, so as of right now, it is the 9th, I think it is today. So we're been communicating and keeping that channel of communication open with our tenants. That's for regarding rent. As you probably would notice right now, your tenants could possibly have been laid off at the current moment or had their hours cut. It's very important to keep that open as we deal with, all of us are dealing with this together as we can, as best as we can. So always have that open communication going at all times. I think it's very, very, very important right now.
One thing that we're trying to do as a company, and that you should as well with your tenants, no matter what your relationship is with them, how well you know them, is just use a lot of empathy.
Absolutely.
Depending on the situation. I mean, everyone's, whether they've lost jobs or not, everyone's stressed out, everyone's worried. So try to be as empathetic as you can, regardless of the discussion that you're having, and be consistent too. So you don't want to make your tenant any more nervous or rattled than they need to be. So if you tell them, hey, we're going to be touching base on a more regular basis right now, just to make sure everything's still going as planned, keep to your plan. And if that's once a week, let it be once a week, but be consistent with it so you don't put any undue stress on them. They're kind of in the same boat that you are as a homeowner. A lot of tenants are worried about their homeowners. Are they paying the mortgage right now? Are they able to pay the mortgage?
Right.
Just the same way that a lot of homeowners as landlords are worried about their tenants paying rent. So we're all kind of in the same boat.
Yep.
But try to be as empathetic as possible. We're all human, and we're all looking out for each other. And the bottom line is they're renting your house, and you want to make sure that they're safe and that they're able to utilize any resources that they need to accomplish their goals.
Absolutely. And we're working, like I said, we're working together on this day by day, whether if you're a tenant, landlord, anything. We're doing this all together. Anything can change daily, tomorrow. I mean, it's just, we're doing the best we can and try to work with each other and lean on each other as much as we can.
Right. That brings us to the third question regarding rent collection. So there are a few things that have changed a little bit with what we've been doing as a company with rent collection. And just to share a little insight with you, whether you're one of our owners or not, we have seen a slight decrease in rent collection at this point compared to a normal month, but not that bad actually. We're about 5% behind where we normally are at this time of the month in terms of rent collection. Which isn't kind of the drop off that I think a lot of us were fearful was going to happen, say 2 weeks ago, going into the beginning of April. Whether that holds through, to May, we don't really know. I don't see how it can really be too much better in May. If anything, it might be a little bit worse.
We are playing it by ear. I mean,
right. But I mean, hopefully, unemployment and stimulus checks and all that kind of thing should be getting out to tenants, soon this month. So if they did lose a job or were furloughed, having trouble making ends meet, hopefully that by May they'll be a little bit more on solid footing. But as of right now, we haven't seen that much of a decrease, luckily. Right. Even though we do have a lot of tenants who have indicated to us that they, especially in the service industry, that have been furloughed right now.
Right.
But as far as rent collection goes, there are some changes that we've been doing. And Amanda, if you want to talk briefly about that.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've done that might be helpful for you as a landlord is to waive late fees. I think it goes the little bit that we can do. I think it goes much further and to help our tenants currently right now. As of also to make, if they are able to pay rent and they don't have the whole amount, I think payment arrangements are very important. Currently.
Payment arrangements are important. We're doing those with tenants who may have had some money at the beginning of the month, but not the full amount.
Right.
It's important if you manage your own property to get that payment arrangement signed and dated by both parties to make it legally binding. But just so utilize payment arrangements as much as possible. Work with your tenants as much as you can to try to get their payment in. Whatever the case may be, whether it's delayed by a little bit or only a partial amount at a time, help them with whatever you can to do as far as to get the partial payments in.
One of the other things it's a recommendation if you'd like to contact your tenant's employer. So ask the tenant to provide you with their name and contact information, and it gives you kind of information to dig in it if you'd like. Just to have that information before you go into a payment stipulation that's documented.
Sure, and that's what we've been asking our tenants to do that. It's not a requirement by any means for tenants to provide that information, but most have been more than willing to offer that. I mean, we're kind of, going out on a limb a little bit with the payment plans and trying to allow them some flexibility. So it's, hopefully a courteous thing to do as far as to ask for a little bit of documentation on their part.
Right.
And also, obviously, the increased communication that we had talked about.
Absolutely.
So that we kind of know when the payment might be coming in, what kind of resources they're looking to get assistance in the future until their job is back. Right. So those are two things that have changed so far with rent collection for us. So, but it kind of leads us into the fourth and final question, which is a big question that some of our owners have had just out of fear of the unknown a little bit, and that's with what if your tenant can't pay? What if there's just absolutely, they've been laid off, maybe since middle of March, even, because that's about the time when some furloughs started happening. And maybe they just don't have any funds at all to pay. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's different with that. You may already know some stuff that you've heard in the news as far as executive orders. But we'll talk about a little bit about that and a little bit of things that are kind of different from a procedural standpoint during this time period. Things you can't do any longer, and maybe as far as the time frame of when those will occur. So Amanda, if you can just kind of walk us through what we would normally do if a tenant doesn't pay their rent and what's changed with that.
Right, so normally we would post a 3-day notice, and we can no longer do that at this point.
Correct, no 3-day notices.
No, we're not allowed to do that. After that, normally we'd post a 3-day notice, and then once they, if they're not paying by the 3rd day, we can file evictions. As of right now, we cannot post any 3 days, and 2, all the evictions have been suspended as of right now for 45 days.
Correct. So that's right. So that's on a state level at a minimum of 45 days. You actually, depending on your own situation, you may actually be impacted at a longer time period than that, which I'll get into in a minute. But just on a state level, the governor did sign an executive order, which I'll briefly summarize. I have the text in front of me regarding evictions and also actually mortgage foreclosures as well. But so the governor recently signed this order. Stating, I hereby suspend any statute for mortgage foreclosure under Florida law for 45 days. Section 2, I hereby suspend any evictions for as relates to non-payment of rent. So that's important because it basically, if your tenant is destroying your property in some way or they're violating a lease clause in a different way, that doesn't mean that they can't be evicted. Now, things have changed even with that clause, but you can still file for eviction under a different clause of the lease other than non-payment if they're in violation of that, which a judge would eventually have to decide. Normally that would be handled by what's called a 7-day notice to cure. You may be familiar with that document. It's been recommended to us by attorneys not to use a 7-day notice to cure, but to use a 30-day notice to cure, which is kind of the same thing, except for the length of time has changed on it.
Right.
And we're seeing this just because judges are very hesitant right now to evict anyone for any reasons, even non-payment aside. So they're kind of erring on the side of cautiousness. So a 30-day notice to cure is being looked at more favorably than a 7-day notice and has a much better chance of, for one, hopefully the tenant will correct the behavior. But if not, the judge is more likely to side with you on a 30-day notice to cure rather than a 7-day notice. So that's one thing that's changed. But getting back to the executive order, so that's also, for payment reasons, that's been suspended for 45 days. Section 3 just states that nothing in this executive order shall be construed as relieving an individual from their obligation to make mortgage payments or rent payments. So that's important to let your tenant know up front that, just because you're not able to do anything as far as eviction, that doesn't relieve them of the cost of the rent. So they still owe the rent. They're still going to owe the rent at some point in the future. Let them know that it's in their best interest to try to work with you on the payment plan and to keep communicating with you regarding this and what they're able to pay regarding their resources that might be changing in the near future as they get more assistance. But it in no way absolves tenants from having to pay the rent. So don't worry about that part of it, but it does mean that it's extended a little bit. So that's on the state level. That's changed. Now there are also, and this is something that came up, I was on a webinar earlier this week from the National Association of Property Managers, which our company is a member of. So I was lucky enough to be able to attend that, which included some congressmen who had some insight on the CARE Act that was passed a few weeks ago. Had some other stipulations in it that you may not even be aware of. It's a 800-page bill, I think, that covered the stimulus payments that are going out, as well as a lot of other industries and relief from other industries. But it does impact single-family home property management in that, in so much as the eviction portion of it. And for evictions, it all depends if your house is, quote, covered or non-covered. And this is in regards to your mortgage payment. So if you do have a mortgage on your property and that mortgage is backed by a federal program, be it the FHA, VA, Fannie Mae, any federally backed mortgage program, you're actually not able to file for eviction on your tenant for 150 days. That's from the start of the CARE Act that was passed by Congress and signed by the president. So that lasts until July 26th. So that may or may not impact you, depending on your situation. Obviously, if you don't have a mortgage on your property, then you're not impacted at all. You just are impacted by the state level 45 days, which may be extended in itself. We don't know yet. But in terms of just the overall federal requirements, if you do have any kind of mortgage that's federally backed, then you are impacted by that, and you wouldn't be able to file for until July 26th for an eviction. So I guess the thought is that if you have that type of mortgage, that they're going to be making provisions for you if you can't pay the mortgage because your tenant's not paying. So they're not going to allow you to evict the tenant in the meantime.
Right.
So that's a big thing that isn't really hasn't really been discussed too much because it's kind of buried in that bill that was passed. But it does impact a lot of homeowners out there who have that type of mortgage on their property. So I guess it's just to summarize number 4 as far as the what to do if your tenant doesn't pay. Unfortunately, right now, not a whole lot. Again, don't issue 3-day notices, don't charge late fees,
Right.
And everything can be revisited then after the 45-day moratorium is lifted,
Right.
unless you're impacted by the type of mortgage that you have on a federal level. And so that's it as far as the 4 main questions we're going to get to. We do have some other content that we're going to go through, some tips, if you will, that we're going to discuss briefly, and also some questions. If you have any questions at the end, we'll take those as well if we can get to them. So the first bonus tip, I guess, would be just in terms of we'll talk a little bit about preparedness, and
Right.
it's pretty hard to always be prepared for something like this. You can never really be fully prepared, but there's going to be things besides the coronavirus that are out there. There's going to be other issues in the future, be it a hurricane. We're in Florida, we're impacted by that all the time. If you're in another state, you might have other natural disasters that are impacting your ability to manage your property. And so we always try to recommend our owners have cash reserves just to be able to cover their mortgages and other expenses that may come up, because you never know when something like this could be. Right now it's on a national level, but things happen on a local level much more often that impact owners and catches people off guard. And it's basically a property investment is a little bit different than stocks or bonds, because it's the type of investment that needs money to be put into it at certain times.
Right.
So you can't just let it sit there and either appreciate or depreciate, hopefully appreciate, but you have to put money into it sometimes, and it's always good to have cash reserves to do that. We try to recommend to have at least 3 months of mortgage payments in reserve, just in case you need to do that, in case you have a tenant that's not paying, that has to go through an eviction process, or in a situation like we have today. But not just from a non-payment standpoint. Your home is a complex asset that has a lot of different systems, whether it be HVAC, plumbing, electrical. A lot of stuff could go wrong. If you have an older house, you may have pipes that need to be replaced eventually, and that's a $5,000 to $6,000 repair. So try to do an assessment of your asset and find out what could go wrong. When you have just a list of items that are maybe still under warranty that isn't going to be a big expense, but also other items that could be problematic in the future.
Right.
Try to make sure that you have the funds to cover that, so you're not relying on having to take out loans or credit cards or whatever to pay for those. So just in general, try to be as prepared as possible, even though it's hard to always be completely prepared. When you have this type of investment, you need to kind of focus on that a little bit more than otherwise.
Right. And that leads to promo tip number 2. So basically, as a landlord, homeowner, during these crazy times, as we're going through this, or anything necessary like this, it might be helpful if you're able to hire a property management company. That's what we're here for. We are here to take care of everyday maintenance, communication with the tenants, rent collections, anything that will take the stress off of you as a homeowner, we will do for you. That's what we're here for.
Right. Property management companies are good for a lot of owners have an emotional connection to their asset. Maybe they lived in it, maybe they plan to live in the home in the future. And sometimes it's hard to make good decisions when you're emotionally attached like that. So it's always a good resource to have.
And we also have a legal team behind us too that can get kind of, if you're a landlord having to deal with it on your own, directly to the tenant, it's really good use our resources when it comes to that, because we would do it for you. We have our legal team,
Right.
and we'd be able to make it easier on you as a homeowner.
Thanks, Amanda. And
Yeah.
finally, the last thing we'll talk about before we get to any questions, and don't worry if you don't get all this down, there's going to be a PDF that's going to be sent out
Yes.
to you that summarizes all this information. But the following that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to flip the whiteboard behind me and kind of go over some things on the board, are just some resources in general that may help you. I don't know if anyone watching is a small business owner. It may help your tenant. You may be able to share this information with your tenants if they're out of work or if they're a small business owner. But it's just a lot of information that you may not have realized is out there. That's hopefully pretty useful. So let me get to that.
Okay. And again, it will be sent to you through a PDF, so you'll be able to have it all in a summary form too. There's our board.
So, and I apologize if the writing's kind of small and you can't really see this too well, but again, it's in a PDF, so don't worry too much about it.
Yeah.
The first thing I want to talk about is just financial assistance that's out there. And again, we're sharing this information with our tenants. You can do the same with yours if they're in any kind of particular hardship. Obviously, the first and foremost would be the state of Florida unemployment assistance. That should be the first thing that anyone is trying to receive, if they're in that position. The second thing is the Paycheck Protection Program, and you may have heard of this. This is for small businesses, but also for self-employed as well, which we have a couple tenants who are in that boat. And what that is, that's a loan program administered at a local level, but backed by the federal government. And they're loaning money to small businesses and self-employed to cover the cost of payroll for several months. And the requirement is that 75% of that has to be spent on payroll. The other 25% can be spent, if you have a business, on other utilities or other things that you need to keep your business going. But the 75% that's spent on payroll is totally forgivable and also not taxable as well. It doesn't have to be counted as income if you do spend it on payroll. So basically, that's available to small businesses, and you can check with any kind of local bank to see if they're offering that program. A lot of them are. There are some that aren't. April 10th is the critical date for anyone who's self-employed. That's the earliest that anyone who's self-employed can try to apply for this program. And like I said, that does impact several people that we know as far as tenants. The next thing is you've heard of the CARE checks, the stimulus bills that was passed, provides for $1,200 payments for people making under a certain amount. Those are expected to go out within 2 to 3 weeks. That's what we were told earlier in the week on the webinar by the congressman that was kind of briefing us on that program. So hopefully those go out there soon. There's also impact loans available on both a federal and local level. On a federal level, it would be based on that website, disasterloan.sba.gov/ELA, and those are 30-year loans that are available to small businesses at low interest rates. And then on a local level, the city of Jacksonville is also providing relief for small businesses and loans via ViStar Credit Union, which is a local credit union here. And those can be applied for at Jack's Relief Loan at vistarcu.org. So that's another resource that may be useful for anyone out there who owns a small business.
Yeah.
And then let me flip the page.
Again, everything will be sent to you during in a PDF form, so you'll have everything, all the information that Jeff's speaking about.
A couple other websites that could be useful to you during this time is the cdc.gov, coronavirus.gov. So they have a separate website with just for information about the coronavirus. I didn't even realize this. Again, I learned this information on a webinar earlier in the week, so I just want to share with everyone out there. There's even rumor control websites. So if you go on FEMA.gov/coronavirus-rumor-control, that kind of covers rumors that are out there floating around right now, kind of debunking anything that's a myth.
Yeah, there's a lot of scams.
A lot of scams, unfortunately. And then also, if you have an iPhone, it doesn't apply to me, but if you have an iPhone or an iPad, Apple has a very nice screening tool to determine without, even before you contact a doctor, to try to determine whether you may, have, COVID-19 or not. It has a screening tool that you can use on yourself and your family. That I saw in operation. That's a really nice feature.
Yeah.
And also, one more thing. So face masks are kind of being talked about a lot the past couple of weeks. And I guess now the CDC is recommending that you wear a face mask out in public. If you're having trouble finding face masks, there is a textile company in North Carolina. This isn't, it may seem like a plug for them. We're in no way connected with them at all. It's just trying to be helpful information. They're called Indira Mills, and they're mass producing textile face masks that are, I think, triple layered cotton. And their phone number is 1-800-334-8605. They're $2 a mask, minimum order 12. So if you're having trouble getting your hands on a face mask or don't know anyone who's making them, a lot of people are making them at home right now.
I know my sister
makes them. My mom's making my family some.
Yeah.
But if you're having trouble getting your hands on any, that might be a good resource for you to look into.
Absolutely. I think it's very helpful. All right. So should we start taking, are there any questions right now currently, or let's see.
I don't know that we have any questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact.
Yeah, you're more than welcome to, we'll be able to reach them.
Oh, we do have one question. Can out-of-state owners qualify for the ViStar loan? That's a good question. I think it depends on where your small business is located. I'll look into that. I can contact ViStar and get more information on that. I don't know if it applies for City of Jacksonville only, but that's definitely a good question to ask, because a lot of our owners do have their LLCs set up out of the city, out of the state, obviously. So I'll look into that and get back to you on that. Any other questions? Looks like we have another one.
We might have one more. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on, guys.
Okay, this is a good one. So have we changed our criteria for prospective tenants? And one thing, we haven't really touched on this too much as far as how leasing has been going. We found that leasing is actually going pretty well right now. We haven't really changed our criteria. We're taking everyone on a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, our criteria hasn't changed as far as qualifications for a property. Now, if we do have anyone who is in a special circumstance or a different situation, that's we always run that past our owners first to let them make a final call on it. They normally would have to meet our minimum criteria though, but we haven't changed that criteria.
No, it's still the same.
Right.
As of right now.
But we have seen just in the past few weeks, renting is actually going pretty good. There are still people, we're getting into the busy season anyway, as far as people moving. But so far, we haven't seen like a complete, downturn in terms of renting. The market is still doing pretty good right now as far as leasing. So let's take a look at some of the other questions. Have any others? Are the courts even open to process evictions? That's a good question. That's kind of taken on a case-by-case basis by locale. Here in Duval County, they are. Whether they're actually, have the same hours or not, I don't know that for certain. But in Duval County, we've been told that courts are still open.
I would imagine they would be pretty backed up once.
Correct. So they may not have a whole lot to do right now because of non-payment, but there are still judges out there for cases unrelated to payment, as we talked about earlier. And let's see. And another question that we received, do we communicate a lot with our current owners? We sent out an informational email earlier in the month, I guess before the month started, and we've been in close contact with owners who have tenants who are in circumstances where they've been furloughed. That's been taking up a lot of our time, but we plan on doing more regular communications with our owners going forward, including information that we presented here today. We try and offer this webinar to our owners as well, so that if anyone could join us, they will. But we'll try to get this information distributed to our other owners who couldn't join us. But we will be planning on communicating more often with our owners regarding any kind of changes. Again, it's a fluid situation, so
communication. I mean, keeping the channel open is the best way right now.
Yep. And I think that's the last question that we have. If anyone has anything else,
more than welcome to.
Oh, we do have hold on one second. Okay, have we sent information regarding unemployment insurance and other financial benefits to tenants? Yes. So tenants who have contacted us. We've been, reaching out, trying to figure out who's impacted by this, and communicating with them more closely. We have given them resources to go to, and making sure they're taking advantage of all this. And we plan to do as we get more information in the future. A lot of the stuff that we presented today, we just learned in the past week.
Right.
So as we gain more information, we plan on communicating more of this with our tenants and sharing with them.
As we do, we want to do with the homeowners as well.
And just like if you're self-managing, like I said, feel free to share all this information with them and try to give them as much information as possible to allow them to get the assistance they need to get back on their feet.
Right. And I think, everything's going to start changing day by day, week by week. So, we're going to do as much as research as we can to help homeowners and tenants. So that's our goal anyway.
All right. One other question, will the links and phone numbers be available on Facebook as well, or only via email? That's a good question. We can definitely make it available on our Facebook page.
Yeah, absolutely.
It shouldn't be hard to get that up there. We'll talk to our web page and marketing people about that and get that up on Facebook.
That's a good idea.
And I think that's the last question that we have. So if you do have any other questions in the future, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, or if you have, my email address is jeff@centerbeamrealestate.com.
And mine's amanda@centerbeamrealestate.com.
So if you have anything that you couldn't think of or that we missed, just let us know and we'll be happy to answer those questions.
And yeah, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for your time. I hope this was informative and helpful.
And let's try to do our best, try to work with each other as much as we can during this crazy, scary time. We're all human, so let's just try to.
And keep in mind, we're all in the same boat, or could be in the same boat soon.
Absolutely.
So take care of yourself and your families, and be safe.
Stay safe.
All right, thank you very much, you guys.
Thank you, bye.
I think you if you're still here, we're having trouble stopping the webinar, so.
Are you sure you want to?
You didn't answer my question.